Mall of America. For more than 30 years, it has been a retail leader and an international destination, and it remains the largest mall in the U.S. Not to mention, it welcomes millions of guests from around the world. It's huge, but it's also so much more. In this podcast, you're going to hear the real stories of how it started and why it continues to thrive. You'll hear about challenges we faced along the way and what you can learn from them. We will feature guests and experts from all walks of life and business, and along the way, you'll laugh, learn, and maybe even change the way you look at things. So if you're a fan of the mall, a brand new visitor, an entrepreneur, or a dreamer, prepare to dive deep into so much more. This podcast is presented by the Bloomington Convention and Visitors Bureau.
Welcome to So Much More, a Mall of America podcast where we bring guests from all walks of life, thought leaders, industry leaders that come together to have interesting conversations. I am joined, my name, by the way, is Dan Jasper. I am a Senior Vice President, MOA Press here at Mall of America. I am joined by my co-host and color commentator, Joe Renslow, who is our Chief Business Development and Marketing Officer. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you, Dan. Looking forward to the conversation today.
Yeah, me too. We have an amazing guest, somebody that you and I have worked with for a long time at Mall of America, Eric Pehle. Welcome, Eric. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Great to see both of you here today.
It's good to have you here. I'm actually going to read an intro, and my apologies for those who are watching on camera, because I'm actually reading off my phone. I shouldn't
really
have said
small
that.
Font,
and
so
a really
let's see
small
if he can
font.
do it without his glasses.
And I know all of this about Eric, but we love having him here. He is the president and owner of Epic Associates, LLC. Eric is a seasoned communications coach and reputation manager with more than 30 years of experience in corporate and crisis communications. He's worked across multiple industries, helping clients share their stories effectively and protect their reputations during times of trouble. Eric launched Epic Associates in 2019 following a long career with a global public relations agency. He started his communications career as a television reporter and anchor after graduating from the University of Minnesota with a journalism degree. And I happen to know that one of his first assignments was at Mall of America. Take us back 31 years, Eric. Tell us who you were working with and what your role at the beginning of this epic industry was.
It all started here.
It did.
It all started here for me. So I came out of the University of Minnesota with a degree in broadcast journalism, and I worked as a reporter, and I got out of that industry and got into public relations, and I was working for a firm based here in Bloomington, Mona, Meyer, McGrath & Gavin, a longtime PR agency here in town, and they had been a partner of Mall of America. And my very first assignment when I started at Mona, Meyer, McGrath & Gavin was help open Mall of America. I'm like, okay.
Why not?
So we set the bar really high right away. It was like, this was my very first assignment. And coming in and helping give media tours in those early days before, the months before the mall opened, helping you really define what was inside the big box, as we were calling it, and started my career. And as I say, it really set that high bar, because I looked at that event and everything we had accomplished in the grand opening of Mall of America, and I kind of measured everything else against that over the years. And it was such an amazing experience, such an amazing time. A lot of great memories as I think back on those early days before the doors opened and after they opened. And
what were some of those best memories from the very opening of the mall?
the chaos. I mean, I absolutely remember that very first day, and man, we had over 2,000 journalists in here covering the grand opening of the mall, and we had every one of the national TV networks had their morning shows out here. We were stationed at different sections of the mall, and we're running guests between the various the places where all of the broadcasts were happening, and it was just a place that was full of excitement, full of energy that day. Just something like you could never imagine, never see again.
I love it.
So were you wearing your tux and tennies or your sequins and sneakers?
Tux.
I believe that was the theme for our opening.
Tuxes and tennies, sequins and sneakers. I remember it well. Yeah, it was. We had a media. I think the media party was like the night before the big grand opening party. And again, it was so cool to just watch people's faces when they walked in. When they walked in the doors for the first time, whether it was a journalist, whether it was a VIP who was here to be a part of the party, or whether it was just a shopper. I mean, I just remember seeing the faces and just the amazement on people's faces when they walked in the door. And it was fun because, I mean, I had been in the mall for several weeks, months leading up to the opening, and it was like every time I walked in and every time I would turn a corner and walk down one of the avenues, it's that overwhelming kind of sensation you'd get, the visual sensation you'd get. And when you watched people experience that for the first time, it was just really cool.
Yeah. One of our favorite clips that Dan and I use in some of our presentations visually is the clip from the Star Tribune after that opening day. And there is a woman peering through those front windows. And to your point, I mean, it tells you the whole story. It's just this look of awe and amazement of like, this is actually happening, and they get a chance to experience it. And so being able to have that experience, that emotion, I mean, that's something that we talk about all the time, that's what motivates us to do more because it's something very special. But there were also a lot of naysayers when we were opening our doors. And so what was your position, or how did you help us with that perspective?
What was the whole reason that the mall hired Mona Meyer, McGrath and Gavin was to help tell people the story and to build that excitement for what was coming. Because to your point, there were a ton of naysayers. The downtowns hated the fact that Mall of America was opening. Outstate Minnesota hated the fact that the mall was opening. Everyone said, this thing will never succeed. It's too big. Nobody will ever show up. And so we were worried about that. Right? And we'd be reaching out over those weeks and months ahead of the opening, having those conversations, inviting people in, and slowly but surely you'd start to see that change in perception when people understood what was being developed here, when people experienced it for the first time. And I think that word experience matters. And it's I think what has set this place apart from any other mall in this country. It's that experience when you walk in the door, the visual experience, the emotional experience, everything about what you experienced when you came in here was different. And it was fun to be a part of telling that story and introducing that to people and just seeing them change and watching them go from being a badvocate, somebody who's out there smashing the idea, calling it a mega mall, just saying this will never happen, to being an advocate, to saying, wow, what a great asset for our community. And it was a lot of fun to watch.
You know, it's so fun too is you talk about when people walk in with their eyes wide, and that was not just 30 years ago. That happened to me this week. I was with a tour group, a group of seniors from Wisconsin, and we watched as a family came in, and they were just astounded as they walked into Nickelodeon Universe. It brings joy, right? And it's part of what makes it special, I think. Yeah,
and it's always, the little kids are running because they can't get there fast enough, and the parents are trying to grab their phones to have. It's always the same experience, but it's so much fun to watch.
I love it. You've been helping us and been an advocate and a partner, a valued partner for more than 30 years now to Mall of America. I would love to, and it's been a great relationship, right? It's been really good. We're going to get to some of the tricky stuff we've dealt with in the past, but I think, in speaking, a lot of different people are following our podcast and listening and watching from different industries. Can both of you talk a little bit about the value of having a trusted outside partner who you can rely on, and the value of having a client, and what that communication works like? And maybe I'll start with you, Eric, and then Jill, if you'd chime in.
Well, I think it's very easy when you're on the inside to lose perspective and to not see kind of the big picture. And I think the part of what I've tried to do over the 30 plus years that I've worked with the mall is to be able to bring in that outside perspective, to be able to say, look at things differently, right? I mean, I know inside we may feel one way, but you've got to have that relationship with somebody on the outside who's willing to come in and say the tough things sometimes, right? And to be able to say we have to look at it differently. And so, that's true in any industry that I work in, having those those outside voices that help you think critically about the challenges that you're facing, the opportunities that are there. That's been a role that I've enjoyed playing. It's not always not always
hard
easy,
sometimes.
but it's absolutely necessary, and I think it's critical to the success of the relationship that you build. Right?
Yep.
You have to be able to. I have to be able to know that you trust me, right?
Yep.
That regardless of what I say, you know you're going to get the kind of the advice from me that I think you need to hear.
Yep.
Absolutely.
So.
And the key word you said was trust. You are a trusted partner that we know you have the history of our property, our brand. So when we come up against some sort of challenge, obstacle, crisis, that you are there, that you know the history. We can inform you of the situation that we're in and know that we have that outside perspective and someone that brings best practices from working with other brands of what might be applicable to us in that point in time. Granted, you know, you have to twist it and make it customized based on the situation that we're in, but that trusted relationship that we have always gives me comfort knowing that you're one phone call away and you're always willing to drop whatever you're doing, even if you're thousands of miles away traveling or if you're in our backyard, that you literally will drop everything to come over. And having a partner like that has been invaluable to our success.
Which you have done more than once,
Yes.
I might add. over
Sometimes
time.
on holidays, sometimes on weekends.
And I will say, any successful business, and I look at Mall of America as a pinnacle, right? I think it's just been an amazing success. Relies on a number of outside partners, right? So you're one of our key ones, but we have a lot of relationships. And I think that's a really good lesson for other businesses, right? Is to build those relationships. And the one thing, and he alluded to this, what Eric was saying is, he tells us the truth. And sometimes it's hard to hear that.
It is, but it's important to have that outside perspective, those partners that you can trust that have been with you along the way and have a fresh perspective, know what you've been through, but can confront you and challenge you with thinking differently, because sometimes when you're in the inside, you get caught in the weeds, and sometimes you can't look at that bigger picture sometimes when you're in the moment. So having somebody to tell you to just take a step back, take a breath, let's figure this out together is an important step.
And that's one of the key things on more than one occasion Eric has told both you and I to do, especially during a time of crisis, is stop, take a breath, right? Because it's hard. You're emotionally involved in this stuff. I want to talk about one of those early in our history. We were running into an issue that you and your team helped us navigate from a communications perspective. Was early on, we had problems with large groups of kids that were gathering in the mall, and many of them were good kids, but it was intimidating. Some of them caused havoc. And so we created a new program, and I know that you and your team helped us navigate those waters. Talk us through that process a little bit.
Imagine that, kids coming to the mall.
I know, exactly, in the 90s.
Crazy.
That was a challenge that I don't think any of us really saw on the horizon, right? But it was an issue that the mall became an incredibly popular place, and almost to the point where there were just almost too many kids in the mall, unsupervised, and that was a challenge in suburban malls all over the place. People saw it as a babysitting service. You just go, you drop your kids off, you know that they'll be safe, let them walk around for a few hours, and you come back and you pick them up. Well, when you've got a place that is as big and as inviting as Mall of America and as family-friendly as Mall of America, those two issues sort of clashed. And you saw it happening here, but you also saw it happening other places across the country.
Absolutely.
And as the mall and as the leadership looked at it, we started to say, what are others doing? And we started to do some research into it and looked around, and we said, I think it was in North Carolina, there was one mall that had started to look at this idea of putting some limitations on when kids could come in. And so we explored it a little bit further, and we started reaching out to the community and creating some of those partnerships before a policy was developed. And we said, how do we think about this critically in a way that serves the community, helps the kids, but also protects the business? And out of that, the Parental Escort Policy was developed. And again, done in partnership with the community to say, how do we get this right? How do we do it in a way that is effective for everyone involved? And it was a model, and it became a huge model for success. Again, I think about the grand opening and all the attention we received on grand opening. We got that same level of attention
when we launched
when we launched Parental Escort Policy, and it wasn't as positive, obviously, as the first go around, right? I mean, it was, what the heck is the mall doing? But it was an important step, and again, I think being able to do that with the community by your side, building those relationships early. And again, one of the things that I've always been impressed about the mall is your willingness to be early in that outreach, to understand where those partnerships need to be, where those relationships need to be, to reach out before there's a problem, to say, let's talk about this, let's work on this together, and then move forward.
And I think what's key is so many people think of technology leading innovation, but this is a great example of innovation, of being a leader, taking a risk, trying something new, and really reshaping how people use the property. And our parental escort policy still lives on today. We've made adjustments to it based on different times of the year or whatever it needs to be, but it's about making sure that there's a parental a responsible adult that is with underage kids at a certain time of day, and it's helped us a lot deliver a better guest experience for our overall guests. But it is modeled now across the country and around the world, and we took that step early on, and people, as many challenges we received with that, people have now embraced it and recognized the benefits of it, and now have rolled it out in other properties.
One thing I'm so proud of since my time here, and I've been here 18 years, is that any time another property reached out to us about our parental escort policy, we willingly shared every detail with them. Right. And we've helped coach many businesses on how you do this and how you get the community involved. And that makes me proud that Mall of America does that.
Yeah. That's the responsibility of being a leader. Right? People look to you to figure out how to get things done, and they have for more than 30 years.
Yep.
Again, you think about retail entertainment and just that kind of destination attraction. The Mall of America was the model for all of that, right? And you have served in that leadership role from day one. How do you deal with large crowds that are coming in? How do you create these kinds of inviting and atmospheres for families? And I think the mall has never shied away from that leadership position to say, sometimes, again, we have to make some tough decisions, right? But we serve a purpose. We are helping the industry. We're moving the industry forward. Absolutely. And you've always been willing to step up to the plate on that.
Which is, I love that tradition and that mentality that we have. That's our personality. It's no surprise to anyone that our country has had some real challenges the last few years with crime and other issues, right? And Minnesota and Mall of America are not immune to that either, right? So I'd love to hear from both of you, both from the business perspective as well as the communications expert perspective. What's the importance of having a plan in place, having a strategy in place? How do you navigate those waters, whether you operate a small business or you operate a gigantic business? How do you navigate these waters of some challenging issues? Yeah, Eric.
I didn't
Jill.
say anything.
We're real subtle, like you take this one. Well, the part about having a plan in place is absolutely critical, right? You can't walk into these types of situations. You cannot be a leader without having a point of view.
Yes.
Right? And I think, again, as I think back over the 30 plus years of working with the mall, there's been guiding principles in place for how you operate as a business.
Yes.
Being a partner to the community, putting the safety of your guests, your tenants, your employees first and foremost.
Yep.
Things like that, having those sorts of guiding principles that drive you as a business, that help you make business decisions, make it a lot easier when things are going south, right?
Yeah,
so
it's a roadmap.
It's a roadmap for how you as a business need to operate, and that's true again for any sort of an organization.
Yep.
But furthering that, it's like you have those principles, but then you have those relationships as well.
Yeah.
Right. So, as we think about, again, Mall of America is a microcosm of what happens in this state, in this country. Crime is a reality.
Yep.
Bad things happen, and bad things happen to good companies, and bad things happen to good people. It's how you respond. But having those relationships that help you when that happens, working as closely as the mall has over the years with Bloomington Police, working with other community organizations, has allowed you, I think, to get out in front of those issues and address them from an authentic position.
Yeah.
Right. And so you're not on your back heels when something like that happens. You're able to lean in on those relationships, and you've built that sort of that bank of goodwill with those partners, with the communities,
built over time,
because of those ongoing actions that you've taken over the years. And so that's part of a purposeful approach to how you have to deal with the realities that you're going to face as an organization.
Well, I feel like we're always dealing with moving pieces, and so a plan is absolutely critical, because you need to get whatever you can control, you plan that and have that set, because there is always going to be something that pops up that you can't control that then you have the bandwidth to address.
Yes.
But if you don't have that plan for those control elements, it's going to put you in a tough situation. And we do that every day with the hundreds of events that we have here. You plan as much as you possibly can, because different things are going to happen that you have to adjust to. So especially in a crisis situation, we have various things that we can project or predict, and you get as much as you, but there's so many different elements that you can shift from one plan to the other. But if you have some of that in place, and we're always debriefing after situations or after events, so that we learn from them and we plan to do things, and we always learn something, and we're stronger in the future. And I think one thing that I wanted to bring up that we learned from Eric and from the communications efforts is that, especially in a time of crisis, and when you're looking at communication, and especially on social media channels, a lot of times it's really hard to be quiet and to step back, because you are passionate about your brand. You want to protect it. You have a lot of, equity built into what you've established. But it's hard sometimes, and you've told us this, you have to just step back. You have to let your brand ambassadors step in for you and let the conversation naturally flow, and let it be organic. And it most of the time just flushes itself out. Sometimes if you insert yourself at the wrong time, the wrong place, you actually make it worse. And so learning that, because it's really hard coming from the brand perspective to not step in to protect. It's like your baby, and you want your kids, you want to protect them. So our team has learned that, and that guidance has saved us, I think, many times of just stepping in the wrong space.
Yeah, it's the hardest thing to do, I think, to be able to step back and to put your trust in someone else, that they will have that same level of care for the brand that you bring to the brand. But again, that's the relationship that you have spent years and years nurturing, and being able to step back and put the trust in that.
Absolutely.
So another piece of advice for business owners, entrepreneurs, others who may be listening or watching too, something I remember we were in the midst of a challenging issue at one point. This was probably 8, 9, 10 years ago, and I was deep into it. And I remember we were on the phone, Eric, and at one point I had gone down this rabbit hole of reading everybody's comments on lines. And you gave me the advice that stop reading the comments. It's not helping.
It's hard.
It's hard because we own it, right?
Yes.
But it was good advice, because I turned off my computer and went, okay, I'm going to take this easy now. I love that advice. The other thing that you've helped us over the years do is, you talked about us being prepared. We practice lockdown. We do a lot of things, but you helped us prepare in other ways from a comms perspective, having statements prepared, having everyone's role ready to go, right? Who's going to answer to the reporters? Who's going to log the calls? Who's going to be the primary spokesperson, which is often Jill in these cases? And you helped us put this ecosystem in place. And now when we do have, whether it's a positive crisis, because there are very positive crises, or one that's a little more hitting at your heart, we have a team in place, and we actually have a location in the mall where we gather the operations center where we handle all this. Talk really briefly about that, Jill, about how we're prepared for that.
Yeah, I think, again, it's talking about putting that plan in place and making sure that individuals know where they can step in the time of need, because a lot of times it has to happen like clockwork. And you don't have that time to then assign. Everybody just knows where they need to go. So our operations team knows their role and responsibility. Our comms team knows where we need to go. And if we need that external help, we're reaching out to the resources needed. But, one thing that going through media training with Eric, and it was invaluable to be able to have the expertise of Eric to help guide us on how to handle those media conversations. And one thing that always that I remember as we prepare for different interviews, no matter what the topic is I'd always get overwhelmed with trying to get everything in there. You want to be able to get all your talking points, but the key was just what are those top 3 things that you want to get across in your message, and organizing it in that way so you weren't overwhelmed, and being able to integrate those points that are important to you and through the questions that the reporters give you. So it was always just simplifying, because sometimes you just make things more complicated than they need to be, and having that voice of reason is always very helpful.
And being authentic.
Yes.
Yeah. Speed matters in a crisis.
Yes.
Right? And now more so than ever before. When the mall first opened, in those first few years, if something out of the ordinary happened, we had time. We had what was called a news cycle back in those days.
Yep.
We had time to prepare, think about what our response should be, get the right spokesperson out there, craft the message in such a way that was reassuring to all of the audiences we were trying to reach. Right? You don't have that luxury of time anymore. Right?
Yep.
The world operates so quickly, and there's this need for instant gratification, instant, access to information. We all expect it. If something bad happens, what's the first thing we all do? We go to our phone and we Google it, right? And we expect to see something. Brands have to be prepared to respond in this new world of, I've got to get something out there quickly. I've got to get something out there immediately. And that's the beauty of the plan you've put together, is that it allows you to respond quickly on the values that matter to you as an organization. That's what you have built into the plan and into the response efforts.
And that instant need to respond is hard, because you want to jump in and but you do have to take that step back and make sure that you're being factual, that you get all your pieces together.
Accurate.
To your point, when we're working with the Bloomington Police Department, or we're working with the city, or we're working with our other partners, we need to make sure that we're all on the same page. So we want to make sure that we're getting the right information out. So we move as quickly as possible, but responsibly, and I think that's important.
Yeah, I agree. We're getting near the end of our time. I can't believe how quickly this has gone. Eric, for somebody who's coming out of college, or somebody who's maybe transitioning into a communications field, what word of advice would you give for them?
Be a better writer.
Yes, writing and editing.
So you can't use ChatGPT, are you saying?
Well, and I always tell this to people too, is I think I'm a really strong writer, and then I give something I've written to Eric Pehle, and he comes back with it edited, and I go, dang it.
Why didn't I think of that?
He's so good.
Writing is a lost art, and it's the foundation for all of our communication, right? And so I think, again, just the casualization of our language that has happened through texting and emails, and it drives me nuts, right? So the biggest piece of advice, work on your communication skills, be a better writer.
I agree. Let's just end with a couple of really fun questions. You don't know these are coming, so, and do you want to answer them too, or should we just have Eric?
Sure, why not?
Yes, okay, so they're all going to be mall related. Your favorite mall memory, quick.
Chasing Michael Jackson through the mall with Maureen Bausch.
Whoa, I want to hear that one some more. That won't be another episode.
I'm going to give Mike a couple seconds to finish that story.
Yes.
You got to tell us about Michael Jackson.
Story.
So,
did you catch him?
Well, no, he got out of the mall before we had a report that Michael Jackson was in the mall. He was here in town for a concert. We found him on one of the security cameras. We located him, and he was up in the park on one of the amusement park rides, and we ran up to the mall trying to find him. He had a mask on his face, right? And back in those days, masks on your face were in public were not common.
Yeah.
And so we were trying to track him down, but we were unsuccessful in getting there before his people hurried him out of the mall.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
That's a fun story. I love that.
Good.
What's one of your favorite quotes?
Oh, I've had so many. One of my favorites is the opening of Nickelodeon Universe, and
Yeah.
you helped us with that transition from Camp Snoopy, which was a beloved brand here in St. Paul and Minnesota, and transitioning to Nickelodeon, but understanding the embrace that we received from our fans and a new brand, which we're 15 years now with Nickelodeon, which is crazy. But the opening of that brought us a lot of joy and excitement.
Another great example of just how the mall continually reinvents itself, and that's just, again, what keeps this place fresh and exciting.
Absolutely.
It's cool.
And that's a good lesson for other businesses as well. Stay fresh, reinvent yourself, think outside the box.
Don't be afraid to change.
Don't be afraid. I love it. And we're going to stop the quizzes with that, if that's all right. Jill, first of all, thank you. This has been a great conversation.
Absolutely.
But to
My
our
pleasure.
special guest and a good friend of them all, Eric Pehle, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it so much.
My pleasure, and
Thank you,
thanks for
Eric.
the partnership over the years. It's been a blast.
We love it.
Yep.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of So Much More. If you want to hear more, be sure to subscribe to our podcast wherever you find your favorites, including Spotify, Apple, or Google Podcasts. And you can also watch a video cast on YouTube. Go to podcast.mallofamerica.com to leave a review, ask a question, or give us an idea for the show. Until next time, thanks for listening. So Much More is presented by the Bloomington Convention and Visitors Bureau, the official destination marketing organization for the city of Bloomington, Minnesota. Before your next trip to Mall of America, visit bloomingtonmn.org for answers to all your travel questions, deals and packages for hotel stays, and so much more.